Okay, hi Kieren, how are you? Welcome to the show.
I feel great. I feel absolutely amazing. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, as we were talking about before you got on, you're from the UK and you're in the UK now. Um, so, thank you for, well, it's not that late. Sometimes I get people on from Australia and New Zealand, and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, but it's 6 p.m. there, so I guess you would be awake, I would think.
Well, yeah, this is quite a reasonable hour
A
for me.
reasonable hour, yeah. All right, so you've got a new book out. It's called N Word in quotes. And have you written other books, or is this a debut for you?
No. I've written two others. So my first book was called Start a Revolution. My last book was called Preeta's Web of Chaos. And then, of course, yes, this book is called N Word. Although all of my books are in the same universe, kind of like the Marvel, the MCU. So while they're all different stories, they're in the same world. There's characters that overlap from story to story, and they're all part of an overall grander narrative as well.
What is the narrative?
Okay. The saving of existence, essentially. So, yeah, let's say that. The forces of good and evil and the battle for existence itself.
Well, this sounds like
Not just,
Star Wars.
sorry?
I said this sounds like Star Wars.
Yeah, in a metaphysical way, maybe, yeah.
Okay.
Not in a physical sense.
Okay. All right. Give us a little bit of your backstory, and then give us a little bit of the backstory of the book, and then we'll dive into a few of the talking points. I've got, looks like 3 pages of talking points here that was sent, but I don't think we'll get to all of that in 15 minutes. So just start with yourself and then hone in on the book, and then we'll see what we can do.
All right. So, who am I? Kieren Paul Brown from the UK, born to Jamaican immigrant parents. I've always been very passionate about writing. Passionate about writing and also passionate about stories as well. And when I create a story, what I'm trying to do at every step of the way is to blow the mind of the reader, to suck them into the world that I've actually created. One of the major reasons why I love stories so much was because growing up, I didn't necessarily have the best time. I wasn't like the most social, and I found like a lot of solace and refuge and comfort in stories, whether or not they were in books or movies, things like this. Something about me which leads towards N word is that, so I'm black, obviously, but I grew up in a predominantly white country and in a predominantly white area of a predominantly white country as well. So midweek, like Monday to Friday, I'm just surrounded by white people. And they would say, you are different because you're black. However, on the weekends, I'd be with black people. And the black people I was with on the weekends would say, you're different because you sound like a white person. So I'm growing up and I'm like, well, you know, who am I? Like, who am I? Where do I fit in? And that gave me a interesting and unique way of looking at things. Like not necessarily feeling like I 100% belong to any particular camp. It gave me a different perspective on human beings, which has actually led into this book here, because N Word is about Antonia, who's an 85-year-old white woman who dies and is immediately reborn in the body of a 23-year-old black OnlyFans and Instagram model. And then she goes on a voyage of drink, drugs, sex, and violence, where she's trying to make up for what she didn't get to experience in her first life while dealing with the ramifications of like 85 years worth of pain, misery, remorse, and regret. Now, Antonia is someone who doesn't feel like she belongs, and she's always really wanted to. The backstory from her is a bit different to what you might expect from a story like this, because usually if you were to have a story where they say, oh, some white person ends up in the body of a black person, they would go down the angle of, oh, I don't like black people at all, and oh my god, no, now I'm in the body of a black person, I've become everything I've hated. So then over the course of the book or the movie, this person has to slowly learn that black people are actually good people. That's like the angle that they normally take this down. However, Antonio always wanted to be black. And the reason for that is, well, it's actually explained in the book. So the book itself follows her in 2 time periods. The first time period is in modern day, when she's in the body of Cara, the 23-year-old OnlyFans and Instagram influencer. But then the other half of the book is in her original body in the 50s and 60s in civil rights era America, and everything that happened to her and everything that she experienced, which made her want to be another race. But yeah, that's a little bit of an overview about the book.
It sounds really interesting. So was she one of the Freedom Riders or something akin to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
She gets involved with Malcolm X, and she's actually working in the civil rights movement secretly.
When you first started to describe the book, I pictured her completely differently. I thought she was like some prim and proper, posh, sort of upper class white woman that all of a sudden is reincarnated. But she was actually rather liberal and progressive for her time. Yeah.
Well, because like I just said, that's what most people would expect.
Right.
Most people would expect it's like, I am nothing like these people at all. Oh my God, now I'm one of them. And when I create a story, it's number one, I want the story to be engrossing, but number two, I want it to be as original as possible as well, while staying true to myself and my morals, values, sensibilities, etc. So at all points, I'm always thinking, what can I do to grab the attention of the reader and make them go, huh. And it's the little things like that. It's the little things that you just expect, as in you just expect her to be a prim and proper white woman, but she isn't. That makes you go, I see. Yeah, that's how you hold attention. You have to craft something that's actually original, but also that makes people think as well. So it's not just like about shock value. It's about actually creating thought and having this person who's reading the book or watching the film or whatever it is look at life in a new way or question the inherent assumptions that they've always had.
Does the entire book take place in America?
Yeah. Well, not in terms of.
What, is she American?
Yeah. In terms of the physical world, the book completely takes place in America. However, the book doesn't completely take place in the physical world.
Okay, I got you. All right. Have you been to America?
Of course, yeah. I've been like 3 times.
All right. How do you compare it to the UK, generally speaking?
It's more or less the same, really. I mean, you drive on the opposite side of the road, which I think is crazy, but it is what it is. Yeah, you got interesting accents. Interestingly, actually, it's a slight tangent. The American accent is a faithful representation of how English people used to speak hundreds of years ago. So, like, if an English person from, say, the 13th or 14th century was listening to me and you speak, they would think you were English and that I was something else. But that's neither here nor there. What's it like America as opposed to England? Yeah, more or less the same. However, growing up in like the 80s and the 90s, America was always this like amazing place that you always wanted to go to, because all of the best media came from America. All of the best films came from America, the best music, TV shows, all of that kind of stuff. It seemed like the best looking people in the world were in America, all of the best cars, blah, 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 blah. That's the impression that I had, and to be honest, tons upon tons of people around the world as well, especially that as a child. Then September the 11th happened, and when that happened, it was like that was the first time I was aware of the fact like, oh, there's actually some people in the world that don't like America at all. I wasn't even aware of that as a reality. What I would say now that I see in America is there was an inherent swagger that Americans used to have about being American, like this innate knowledge of Americans being the best, which, to be honest, could get mildly annoying at times, to be fair. Like this inherent like superiority. But point being, that seems to have completely gone now. And now I see Americans feeling largely ashamed about being American. That's what I see a lot, which I also think is a well, which I think is a massive shame. It feels like America as a country has lost a lot of its, swagger. But again, to get back to how it differs to the UK, I mean, so for instance, in the UK, this book's about racism, fine. But it's not like racism is an American only concept. Granted, it was worse in America than in the UK because we didn't have slavery over here. But Black people growing up over here, when I did, anywhere from the 60s to say the 90s, we experienced stuff as well. I was constantly told to go back to my own country when I was younger. I haven't heard that for 20 years, but I heard it when I was a kid. I heard it all the time. I had people trying to start fights on me and to attack me for no reason. Again, that hasn't happened to me for like 20 years, but it did happen when I was growing up. So to be honest with you, the two countries are very, very, very similar, but you know, there are some subtle changes, and I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, very well. And in fact, the idea of the swagger, I think that's a good point to bring up because I believe that to be true. And I believe that somewhere along the line, and maybe it was 9/11, that sort of kicked us in the teeth and took us down a few notches. Whether that was good or bad, I don't know. I have a friend who's Canadian who said, and I asked him the same question, and he said, the only difference between America and Canada is we're exactly the same except without the attitude. And I thought that was about right. You know, the Canadians just don't have that. But other than,
that is true.
Yeah. We've got just a couple of minutes, so let me hit a couple of these points here because some of them are very interesting. I'll skip right to the good ones, you know, just since we don't have.
Yeah, give me the juicy stuff.
The juicy stuff. It says, and it's also in brackets. So it says, erotic themes alert. The book gets quite steamy in places. So, what's the heat level? Is this a triple X
Nuclear.
or is it nuclear? Is it, yeah?
I mean, okay, look, here's just the honesty, right? I set out to write a story which would stand on its own as a fantastic story. It is like there's 45 chapters and there's only 5 chapters with any kind of sex in there. But I wanted those sexual chapters to be as hot as is humanly possible. The honesty is I wanted to compel people, the reader, to perform certain acts while they were reading those chapters. That was my goal at all times. For it to be that hot. Now, as for whether or not I've pulled it off, well, people can just read the book and find out, but that was the goal. In terms of how hot it is, very hot. However, it's not, while being hot, it's also tasteful as well. And I've gone to obscene amounts of time and effort to build up like an erotic mood. It's not crass at all. It's not like crass and it's not vulgar. It's deeply sensual and deeply stimulating, so that by the time anything nuclear happens, I mean, the heat has slowly been rising and rising and rising until it's reached that point.
Okay, you don't think that's antipathetic to the story, though?
Come again?
I said you don't think that that's antipathetic to the story?
I don't know, but I'd be interested to see why you think it might be.
The only reason I say that, and it's not as a judgment, but generally speaking, if the point of the eroticism is to overstimulate somebody, it could take away from the story. In other words, do you understand what I'm saying?
Okay, but the thing is this. So the erotic chapters in this book have been written in a way so that they actually tie into the themes of the story. They're actually integral to the story. The book itself is about largely Antonia's exploration of her own identity and acceptance of herself as a sexual being. So, for instance, the very first erotic chapter in the book sets in motion everything that happens in the book after that. And even the way she feels, it's not just about, oh, wow, she's turned on. It's she has been walled off from certain parts of herself for decades due to things that happened to her in her past. And as this erotic mood or as this event is occurring, it's unlocking things within her which have been literally imprisoned for decades and decades, and she's being reborn, almost like a phoenix from the ashes. So it's not taken away from the story. It's not like there's the story itself and then sex occurs. It's directly part of the story.
Well, that's very interesting. Did you self-publish this, or do you have a publisher?
Self-published.
Self-published, okay. Is there a warning required on the book?
Yeah, I mean, I don't particularly think so.
Okay, so, but I mean, Amazon didn't require one?
No.
No? Okay, good. All right. Because sometimes that can work both ways. That'll either scare people off or just make them want to buy it.
Well, it's like in the back in the day with like the hip hop albums where they'll go parental advisory.
Right,
explicit,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
which is actually a selling point.
It is. It is. Because then people want to buy it just to hear the N word and the F word over and over again. Yeah. We are out of time, unfortunately.
Oh, that's a shame.
But thank you so much for coming on the show. Last question, do you have a website you want to give out?
Yeah, so KierenPaulBrown.com, which is KierenPaulBrown. Also, you can find me on Instagram as well. It's literally the same name, Kieren Paul Brown. And if you type that into Amazon, you can find the book and then, grab it, give it a shot, have a read.
Okay, the book has been released. When was it released?
Today.
Oh, today. Okay.
Yeah, literally today.
All right, great. Well, best of luck with the book. I hope it does well. It sounds very interesting.
Yeah, well, thank you. And once more, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time.
Oh, my pleasure.